All right, guys. So continuing off domain one here, finishing that off as a concept, just in our exam blueprint. We want to work our way into the nutrition stuff today. So, um, like I said, not quite as much content, which is nice, just considering how full stuff has been. But we got to find our, that's not it, nutrition stuff here. That's also not it. Where are actually? That's really that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this. um. All right. So, taking our way through a good chunk of chapter nine, just in terms of like stuff that we want to cover, um, and then also working off of our website here. Um, we've got that sort of like backdoor version of the textbook here on our NASM accounts once we get that. So we go here, click continue, launch that up, wait for my computer to be a little bit faster.
Hey,
Go to
I feel like
it.
I'm being really stupid here. Are we doing exam prep or are we doing nutrition? What class are we officially in right now?
So this is exam prep, and there is nutrition
Okay.
in your exam.
Okay. But we still have the nutrition class to take, right? I'm looking
Yes.
at my list trying to figure out what I still have to
Oh, no,
take.
no, no, no. Like you don't, this is not the nutrition class. This is the this is the
But I
nutrition.
still have a nutrition class to take, correct?
Yes, yeah. So this
Okay.
is the
That's what I want to make
nutrition
sure.
day of the review class.
Got it. I got it.
Yeah. Yeah, no. We are still, yeah, classes are definitely there's not a class in the PFT program that's less than 8 days long. Like in terms of like your content and stuff, you'll never have a class with me that
Right.
is shorter than eight consistent days of the same thing. Um, I know in some of the other programs there's like 1 or 2 day classes and stuff, but that's not a thing for us. Um, so yeah, but we gotta do nutrition because that is still in your test. Um, going into it, right? Um, right over here, we're gonna start off with like, let's go ahead and start with a definition of nutrition. I don't think that's actually one of your things, but it's just a good place for me to begin talking. So nutrition by definition, we're going to say this is the process of obtaining nutrients through food and or food products to support energy requirements and cellular processes. So that includes like growth, maintenance of tissues, and then obviously like, reproduction, digestive processes, respiration. So you need food in order to like power and do all of the things that we do every day, right? That is where we break down, you know, the energy found in foods and stuff in order to allow us to do all the things. And we could get even more complicated with that. Why is it that food has so much energy trapped within it? Well, like plants are really good at trapping energy from the sun. So everything you've ever eaten is basically you finding a way to convert energy from like sunlight into energy to do work. There's kind of a weird way to think of like what food is, a weird way to kind of think of like what nutrition is. But honestly, that's like what it is, right? Like, all the biological organisms on this planet sort of evolved together. Plants figured out how to take in sunlight directly and just convert it into energy. We didn't figure out how to do that as like biological living organisms, but we did figure out how to eat those plants and convert the energy from those plants and get the energy from the sunlight by doing that. So that's what our digestive system actually does, right? It basically breaks down energy from plants, which is energy from sunlight. And that allows us to do all the stuff. And then we also figured out a way to eat other animals who ate plants, which broke it down. So that's also all part of the same system. um, but all of it is energy from sunlight in the end. And that is what's going to allow us to literally power everything that we do. That's going to allow us to, create like cellular processes. That's going to allow us to continue breaking down food as like our digestive process, and it's going to allow us to like move around, right? So nutrition by definition, like we said, obtaining nutrients through food. Now, what are actual nutrients? Well, when we break nutrients down, we're going to have six of these, right? So we're going to have two major categories of nutrients. We are going to have macronutrients, which are going to be our proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Actually, I'm going to put this in a slightly different order. We're going to go fats, uh, carbohydrates, then proteins. And the only reason I do that is it's totally not important to do it that way. It's just that is the order they are in on a nutrition label. So I always like to do it in that order. So fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. These three here are going to be what we consider to be macronutrients, right? So macronutrients are the reason we call them macro is because these are nutrients that you need in large amounts every day. Like basically, you need these in full. I know a gram isn't that big when you consider how much a pound weighs, but like full grams every single day, right? So these are macro nutrients, right? Meaning macro for big, right? Then we also have like our vitamins and minerals, right? And those are going to be our micronutrients. Their job is basically to support our ability to break down all of those other things, or maybe sometimes to give our body like inorganic structure, which is also kind of a weird thing to say. You're like, whoa, 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 what part of me is inorganic? Right? That's like kind of a spooky thing to say. So these are micronutrients. Well, when you think of like the term organic, we're not talking about like farm raised or antibiotic free or anything like that. That's not what we mean when we say organic. I mean, like if you're going to a grocery store, sure, like that's what the term organic means. But in the world of biology and nutrition and just science in general, whenever you hear the word organic, guys, it means that it is something on the periodic table, so some type of like element, right? That doesn't really interact very well with carbon. So if you've ever been watching a sci-fi movie and they've been like, we found other carbon-based life forms, it's like I don't know, that's like a classic like sci-fi trope. Like sci-fi movies love to use that term because people don't use that term very often, and they're like, what's carbon-based? It's a big fancy way of saying something that's not basically biological life as we sort of know it. Um, it's in the same way that like if you ever watch like a medical movie, they'll say someone's having a myocardial infarction, which is a big fancy way of saying they're having a heart attack. But movies like to sound fancy in order to raise the stakes there. But yeah, so carbon-based stuff is like your carbohydrates have like a carbon skeleton. Your fats also have a carbon skeleton. A little bit different looking, slightly different shape, but those two things are basically the same list of ingredients. And then proteins also have a carbon in them. They have more of a nitrogen skeleton, but still have like a lot of carbon present. So all three of those major macronutrients are very carbon based. And then also like vitamins are also very carbon based. They are a little bit more similar to proteins than they are to anything else. They look like little miniature proteins actually. But they're so small, they don't have any energy. They don't have any calories or anything like that. But the minerals are other things on the periodic table. I mean, if we pull up the periodic table here, we'll find, um, all of these different elements. Ooh, Google's got one. I didn't know that. Although I need a picture anyway, so that's not gonna. I need to be able to zoom. So sorry, Google. um, do to do. So you look here. You got all these different like elements and stuff, and each of these various colors kind of have them arranged. Obviously, they're arranged periodically. Basically, they're arranged in such a way that they're arranged in terms of like how much of them you're probably going to find, right? So number one is hydrogen. It's the thing that's most in the universe, and yeah, we have a big amount of hydrogen inside our body, actually. We are made mostly of water, which is H2O, right? So um, two hydrogens and one oxygen. So there's a lot of hydrogen in our body, but also carbohydrates have a goodly amount of hydrogen in them. Proteins have a good amount of hydrogen in them, and so do fats and vitamins. But like I said, the inorganic stuff, right? That's the stuff that's not interacting with carbon. So carbon's like really good at binding to all these biological materials, really good at binding to, nitrogen and oxygen and hydrogen, right? These are kind of the four big ones. But it's also pretty good at binding to a few other things out there. But there are some things that it's not so good at binding to. So, for instance, copper. Copper and carbon, they're not like naturally good friends, you know? But you guys have seen copper listed in vitamin supplements before, I'm sure. You've seen it talking about like certain foods that are very rich in copper. Copper is a big part of our body, actually. It's part of what helps our immune system function. It is something that helps with metabolism, right? So we need to have trace amounts of it in our body, but we don't need like a lot of it because it's not, weirdly, it's like not part of like what we would consider the biological parts of our body, right? To use a slightly better example, calcium, right? So calcium, which I'm having trouble finding. Where are you, calcium? You should be over here. Yeah, calcium is also an inorganic part of our body, meaning that like, the calcium hard parts of your bones, there's something that sort of like live inside of us, but like the biological parts of us, calcium's not that, right? Like, so weirdly, like you've seen it in like cartoons and stuff. You ever see like one of the ways that like a cartoon represents that like somebody's out in the desert or like dehydrated? Those show like a cow's skull, uh, you know, in like the desert, like that's like a classic like kind of thing, like Bugs Bunny will be stranded and he'll come along like a cow skull and it's like, oh yeah, he's thirsty, like, um, so like what you're seeing left behind is all of the calcium and stuff, but there's no living tissue left here, all the proteins and things like that have been sort of eaten away by bugs and bacteria or whatever happens to be in that environment. And so the only thing kind of left behind is this like rock material. But your bones are actually made of a lot of stuff, way more beyond just that calcium. It's made of a lot of protein, it's made of collagen. There's blood vessels running throughout your bones, right? All of that is the organic like parts of you, but the inorganic stuff, yeah, like we keep some inorganic stuff inside our body, and so that's what your minerals are. So okay, so we've got fats, carbohydrates, and proteins making up like our body, the organic parts of us, and allowing us to do stuff every day. And so we need to keep like we're damaging those things consistently, so we need to keep bringing them in through food in order to ensure that like we are repairing the body, and keeping up with that repair process, right? Just like your bank account, like you spend a little bit of money and then you put more money in the bank account and it goes back up, and then you spend some money and it goes down and you put some money back in, right? It's a cycle. Vitamins are going to kind of help with that cycling process. And minerals are the inorganic parts of us that also we need to kind of keep bringing in because maybe they get flushed out of the body, they stop functioning, maybe there's some damage, right? And so that's kind of what your bigger sort of nutrients are. But there is one more that we have to talk about, which is the most important nutrient that you need in the largest amounts every single day, and that is water, right? So water is obviously very critical because it allows us to metabolize, right? And when I say like metabolize, like metabolism is kind of the fancy magical thing that like, organic creatures on this planet can do, right? And water kind of just gets to be its own thing. That is what allows us to kind of convert all of this like plant and other stuff into, materials that we as like a biological organism can do, right? So metabolism is pretty magical stuff, and any chemical reaction that you've got inside your body is what we are going to consider to be part of your metabolism. Any biochemical reaction, right? So if it is like a bit of chemistry going on in your body, so for instance, one molecule of oxygen binding itself to a red blood cell because your red blood cells have proteins in them that attract that oxygen. Well, that took some chemistry. That is part of your metabolism. Some people can do that a little bit faster than others. Trisha, you're a big long distance runner. I know you do a lot of like cardio stuff. So, the more long distance cardio you do, the more enzymes, which are little proteins actually, that your body is going to make in your red blood cells. Um, the more enzymes you have, the more likely your red blood cells are to be able to grab oxygen effectively, right? Everybody can do it, but like you can do it a little bit better the more often you do it, which is kind of cool, right? So, well, your blood also has a ton of water in it, right? And so, with that water, that's allowing that oxygen to move more easily because oxygen can flow through it a little bit more effectively. And also, it is going to allow that red blood cell to have like the mass that it needs to be able to kind of move around, which is also really, really important. And yeah, making enzymes and stuff. What's interesting, I just said that, the element that you're going to find in us the most is like hydrogen. And we're also going to find like lots of oxygen, right? H2O, right? That's water. Well, if you can actually use water to bust up molecules. So that's a really big part of things. Like if you take a donut, which has a lot of carbohydrates and fats in it, right? You're going to need to be able to break those down. We can use water to do that. So water is our most important nutrient by far. But when you talk about the concept of nutrition, we go back to our exam blueprint here, right? And we're talking about like what nutrition is. It is the study of our macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fat, and our micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. And then our sixth nutrient is water, which is what hydration concepts is right here. So let's go ahead and break those each down just a little bit further. Oh, see, of course, Nassim's going to go in a different order than I like to go. I like to go fats, carbohydrates, proteins because the nutrition label. But Nassim's going proteins, carbs, and fats, which does roll off the tongue a little bit better. Uh, let's go ahead and take a look at protein first here. So by definition, we're talking about protein here, right? Just protein by itself. Let me open up a different thing. So we're going to give protein a definition. We're going to say like, well, what is an actual protein? Let's go ahead and take a look at our textbook and grab sort of our specific definition here. So a protein is going to be amino acids linked together by peptide bonds. Another thing you could say is they are the building blocks of body tissues, right? So we'll say protein is going to be, by definition, amino acids linked by peptide bonds, or we might say they are the building blocks of body tissues. I don't particularly love that definition only because it doesn't, now you're like, well, now I gotta remember what a freaking amino acid is, So let's go ahead and talk about that for just a second. Oh, hold on. Let's bring this way. And let's go like right there, I think, kind of halfway. So what is an amino acid? An amino acid is a very interesting sort of complex chain itself. We take a look right here. It's an organic building block. So again, organic, meaning it's going to have some carbon in it, of protein containing both a carboxyl and an amino group. Also not super helpful if you ask me. So we're going to say it's the organic building blocks of proteins. That is the big part here. But basically, when you look at like what a protein is a bunch of amino acids linked together in a chain, right? And I will say, just for the sake of like having this note, because I think it's very helpful, your amino acids are molecules. Actually, let's do a bullet point. These are molecules that contain carbon. So again, we're carbon-based. Hydrogen, oxygen, but the big important one is nitrogen. And actually, I'll underline nitrogen because that's the part of it that makes it unique, right? So an amino acid is this like little material that's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and it's got a little bit of nitrogen. And the nitrogen's super cool. It basically makes the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen fold and coil, and it goes in all these really cool, kind of interesting shapes. In fact, there are 20 variations of amino acids. Okay, so you're going to find in the human body, well, in the universe, actually, not in the human body, just in the universe in general. That was weird. There are 20 amino acids in the universe. Okay. So of like all the different shapes, I want you guys to think of this. Think of amino acids kind of like the alphabet, right? So like if I was trying to piggyback on our conversation from yesterday, where we were talking about like second languages and stuff. Let's say I'm talking to Frank and I'm trying to teach him like a made up language that I came up with. So I'm like, you know what? The English language, 26 letters, that's way too many letters. And so I'm like, you know what would be great is a nice round number. We need an alphabet with only 20 letters. No Q's, no Z's, no X's. Get rid of all that weird stuff, you know? And so we're going to come up with Brad's very own language here, and I'm going to try and teach it to Frank. Well, when I'm teaching him, I'm gonna have to start with that alphabet. Like before I try to like teach any words or anything like that, first we gotta just like understand all these like new letters that I sort of invent, right? And so what's gonna happen as this sort of language evolves and gets created is that like as I start to try to make like words, right, I gotta take all these unique made up letters that I'm creating first. So every word in my language is going to be made up of these 20 different new letters, right? That's exactly how proteins and amino acids work, actually. So when you need to make a protein, you make it out of, in the human body at least, or in any animal body, you're going to make it out of all of these 20 amino acids. So every protein that's out there, all of them, guys. Like, there is not one protein in your body that you are going to find that doesn't have all 20 of these amino acids in it. Okay, so there's 20 amino acids there, and every protein that your body has all 20, right? Now, are there some proteins that exist out there that might be missing a protein, like an amino acid or two? Is that possible? Is it possible to have a protein but not have all 20? Yeah, actually. You'll find those in plants. Plants actually can survive, and they can make proteins in their bodies. And they might miss an amino acid or two. They might actually, or have very low levels of amino acids, right? But if it's an animal protein, so like a biological organism, we know that the only way that you can get a protein is if you take all 20 amino acids and put them together. And it's like, well, that's kind of weird, right? Like when you consider that, if you just take that in isolation, that's kind of a weird concept because like Imagine baking something and it always has all 20 ingredients in it. Everything's going to kind of taste the same, right? Like you're just going to make a bunch of not even variations. You're just going to be making the same cake every time, right? But here's the thing. The order of those amino acids and the levels of them, obviously, are going to determine like what type of protein you make. So every protein in your body, your collagen in your skin, the enzymes in your saliva right now, the proteins in your hair, the proteins that make up muscle, right? Muscle is nothing more of protein. Actin, myosin, right? Those little miniature proteins we talked about on Monday, those are proteins, right? So they all have the same ingredients in them, but they're obviously all different proteins. So how did we get that? Well, just like an alphabet and just like language, it's like the English, language, we have all kinds of different letters. Depending on what order you put those letters in, we get different words. The same thing is true of protein. So there are 20 amino acids, right? And every protein your body makes uses all 20 of those amino acids. But if you put them in a different order, you'll get different proteins. So we take a look right here. You can see here's all the individual amino acids. Can I open this in a separate picture? No. I can zoom in. So you can see like these are all individual amino acids. Now we're going to put them in this order right here. That's going to form like a peptide. Peptide is basically like a short chain of a protein or like a precursor to a protein. Or sometimes you'll see like a peptide bond. Peptide bond is what connects two amino acids together. So a peptide bond is a little bond between each of these little amino acids. And a peptide itself is a long chain of amino acids. And then a fully assembled, very long chain of amino acids is a full-blown protein. So you can see it's kind of coiling itself in this kind of ring-like shape in our sort of example here, right? But if I were to like take this, right? Let's see, I can actually, I can do, hold on, print screen. Come down here, paste that. Huzzah. So here's our protein. Now, if I were to take each of these individual amino acids, I'm just going to grab that and put it over here. I'm going to grab that one and I'm going to attach it here, right? So I reverse the order, but then I'm going to go over here. I'm going to grab this one, right? And I'm going to put it next. And then I'm going to grab this one and I'm going to put it, oh, come on now. We're going to put you over here. And then I'll take one from the middle here. I'll go like that. And so I'm just going to kind of rearrange the order of all of these amino acids, right? I'm going to take my little made up language here, and I'm going to rearrange the letters in that language to come up with a different word, Boom. So what we had over here was, let's say, I don't know, hold on a second. So this over here, we're going to say this is, I don't know, muscle, right? So there we go. There's our classic sort of like protein that we're making. This little peptide bond is going to come together to make up like muscle tissue, right? But the one over here that I made, right, this little guy, we're going to say that this is an enzyme, okay? Remember, enzymes are little precursors that they kick off. They're like fuel on a fire. They kick off your metabolism, right? So the same ingredients are found in enzymes and found in muscle. They're both proteins, right? They have all of these 20 amino acids, right? But if I change the order, I get a totally different protein. So when you're eating like a chicken breast, right, your body's going to be like, oh, great, that's all 20 amino acids that I need. So it's going to take that and it's going to break it down into individual amino acids. Then your body is going to go, cool, and it's going to put it all back in order and make whatever you need. Muscle, hair, skin, whatever, whatever protein of the thousands upon thousands of proteins that you have in your body, we're going to take that chicken breast and we're going to change its shape and make it into, Trisha shaped stuff or Brad shaped stuff or Lisa shaped stuff. Like it's just gonna kind of rearrange things and make whatever it is that you happen to need. So that is what proteins and amino acids are. Do we have any questions on that in general so far? How are we doing, guys?
Okay.
Pretty clear? Cool.
Good.
So a couple other things to talk about. Now we can break this down. One thing we're going to see, and there's a big list right here. You can see we've broken this down into actually 3 columns, which does not match with our 2 columns over here. But we're breaking down protein into 2 major categories. One is that you are going to see, we'll talk about essential amino acids. So we're going to see essential amino acids. And by definition, we're going to say that an essential amino acid is an amino acid that must be obtained through the diet because your body does not make it. Okay. So essential amino acids are amino acids that you have to eat. They have to be in your diet. If you don't have them, your body, remember, your body has to have all. Come on now, what is happening? Ugh. Your body has to have all 20, letters in the alphabet there, or all 20 ingredients necessary in order to be able to make proteins. Okay. Your body cannot operate and make protein without having all 20. So 20 of them, or sorry, 9 of them have to be obtained from your diet. Okay, so there are 9 of these. Those are why they're essential. Anytime you hear the word essential, by the way, when you're studying biology, it means that it's basically like essential that you eat it or that you get it, right? And then the other 11 are non-essential amino acids. And these are amino acids that the body can make by breaking down other amino acids. So basically, like if you didn't get enough of one particular amino acid, and it's a non-essential one, your body can be like, oh, okay, that's all right. Like I can take, that glutamine there and I can break it down and I can use that to make more of what I need, which is, let's say, threonine, right? So threonine, non-essential amino acid. Cool. But you have like valine. It's one of the 20. Valine is super necessary. All of them are necessary. But your body can't make it. Without like actually eating valine, your body has no way of making it on its own. And your body needs all 20 amino acids. So if you didn't have any essential amino acids in your diet, your body wouldn't be able to make any new proteins, which means it wouldn't be able to repair itself, and eventually there would be breakdown. So we definitely need to make sure that we are getting all of our essential amino acids in. It is essential that it happens within our diet. And luckily, it's super easy to happen. You really don't even have to worry too much about it. The only time you need to be somewhat concerning yourself with getting enough amino acids is if you are on like a vegetarian diet, and like you're following the rules of vegetarianism, meaning that like you're not eating any meat, but you're not following the rules of like eating healthy. So like if you had a diet that is entirely pasta, right? You're like, for the next 2 weeks, I'm gonna go on a pasta cleanse, and like all you ate was like spaghetti, like that's all grains, right? Grains have a lot of amino acids in them, but the plants that make up grains are missing just like a couple. They're missing just a few of those amino acids. So, not a big deal with the non-essential ones. But the essential ones, if you're missing, let's say, threonine, right? If you do not have that in your diet because it's not found in pasta, Well, your body will basically stop having the ability to make protein. Now, what it'll actually do if it was like a 2 week situation, your body would just break down some of your muscle mass, which is going to have some threonine in it, and it'll like find a way to, get the amino acids that it needs, and that'll keep your nervous system, functioning and stuff. But yeah, that is our amino acid conversation. You really don't have to worry about like being low. It's really difficult to like, truly do this unless you're on like a diet where you're literally just like not eating a variety of foods. So that kind of leads us to, so why did I use the example of like a grain? Why not talk about like, what about like a chicken breast? Or what about like, you know, bacon or something like that? Well, one of the rules I said earlier about proteins is that like in your body, right, you are going to have every amino acid present. Every protein in your body has every amino acid in it. That is true of every animal in the universe, at least as far as we're aware, Um, so when you consume like animal products, you are ensuring that you are getting all amino acids every single time. So that worry of like maybe not getting enough instantly out the door. Now, does that mean that that is a superior diet to like a vegetarian diet? No, definitely not. It is super easy. All you have to do is eat a grain paired with some type of like um, legume. Instantly you're crossing over and you've got totally full proteins. So I'm not saying that actually is like a superior diet or anything. I'm just saying that it's sort of guaranteed. Hold on, go back to this and say that. All right. So we're going to see two terms here. We're going to say complete proteins, and this is more talking about like food sources, my God, food sources, rather than talking about metabolism here. But we are going to see the term complete protein, and a complete protein is a protein containing all amino acids. So it's got them all. Every animal product is instantly going to be a complete protein because an animal cannot have a protein in its body without all 20 amino acids. But there's also a lot of plant versions of complete proteins out there. Soy is a really good example of like a protein that is found in plants that has every amino acid. So that's a really good example. Quinoa is another one. There's a few actually out there. Plant-based complete proteins. Yeah. Quinoa, yeah. Tofu. Yeah, well, tofu is soy. We already said that one. Amaranth, huh? I didn't know that. That's kind of cool. Yeah, buckwheat, spirulina, that's a fun one. Spirulina is algae. I guess I should have thought of that one. That's a complete protein. Hemp and chia, I'm kind of surprised at. And then we're starting to see like combinations of things. So yeah, so there's a lot of like plant sources out there that are complete proteins. Once they're a protein, they act completely the same inside the body. There's no advantage to the fact that it came from an animal or not. So then, what the heck is an incomplete protein? Well, an incomplete protein are all those other plant-based sources, right? Like green beans. Green beans are super good for you, and they have a little bit of protein in them, not a lot, but some, right? Well, they have proteins, but the amino acid profile means they might be missing one or more of those amino acids. So this is a protein source missing one or more missing one or more amino acids. Okay, so that is the difference there, right, between complete and complete sources. So that's kind of everything on. I mean, there's a little bit more, but in terms of like what's going to be on your test, yeah, not really doing much more. There is one more little thing, actually. I will say there's one more. Go back to our blueprint here because we're kind of focused on this right now. recommendations and guidelines for how much protein to get. So what is our actual recommended protein intake? Now, this is going to be a little surprising for some of you guys. You might find that you feel like this is a little bit low, but recommended protein intake. This is going to seem really, really, really low. But it is going to be, oh, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weights per day, I should say. So that's not very much. That's about 0.4 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Now, anybody in here who has like studied nutrition or like, you've looked at like, maybe putting on muscle in the gym or anything like that, you might be hearing this and going, that is way too low, right? Like I said, it's about 0.4 grams per pound. So somebody like me, right? Where's my calculator? That's about 72 grams of protein a day, which you might be thinking it's like, yeah, that's really low, That doesn't sound like very much. Well, here's the thing. That's about how much protein you need for a sedentary individual. So our recommendation is based on the CDC recommendations here. That is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And it should be noted that that is the recommendation for sedentary individuals. Now, it's weird that you are here to study training, which means anybody who is working with you is going to be training, which means they're not going to be a sedentary individual. But that is the number you need to know to pass your test, which is really weird. They don't make you memorize all the numbers, It goes up, by the way. It's around 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight for cardio athletes. It's about 1.8 grams for strength training athletes per kilogram. So 1.8, actually, I think the highest is 2.0 for like bodybuilders, And here's the thing, 2.0 grams. So a per kilo or 2.0 grams per kilogram. So there are 2.2 kilograms for every pound. So guys, if you want to take the classic bodybuilder recommendation of 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, that is more than you need. Like for me, right? Again, 180 divided by 2.2, right? So that's 80. I weigh about 81 kilograms. So times 2, that's about 163. The most protein my body can probably process and use in a day is probably about 163 grams a day, But if I wanted to do 180, that's 1 gram per pound. That is more than I need, but it's also not getting into like ultra high protein levels where my kidneys are basically like working overtime. Um, I'm probably fine. You guys can totally do the 1 gram per pound recommendation. There's nothing wrong. It makes the math easy. It's really easy for your clients to remember, which is why it's been so popularized and lasted so long. But to be fair, just remember, it is actually probably more than you necessarily need, But also on the other side of the argument, going slightly more than you need is a pretty good way to make sure that like on days that you're not getting the protein you need, you're kind of filling in your gaps, So if you have like a really low protein day, that can actually be pretty helpful, to go a little bit over on the day before. So that's my take on protein. I actually really do like the 1 gram per pound recommendation. But whenever I'm asked, I do tell people, I'm like, yeah, technically that is actually more than you need. So our recommended protein intake is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, or the other version of the recommendation is 10 to 35% total caloric intake. So let's say Erin is on a 2,200 calorie diet. Another way that I could figure this out for her would be 2,200 times, we'll pick a number between 10 and 35%. We'll say 0.25. So 25%. That's going to give me 550 calories for Erin's diet per day from protein. Now, how many calories are in a gram? Because that's what I need to convert it to, right? 4. So she needs about 137 and a half or 138 grams a day in this sort of like scenario that we're making up here. And that's our last little bit of information here. This is the final thing. 4 calories per gram of protein. So that is pretty much every piece of information you're going to need for protein. They're really not going to ask you anything beyond that. You know, oh, there's those, right? Oh, there's my numbers. So 0.8 grams per kilogram, 1.6 to 1.7 if you're a strength athlete. A little bit lower for cardio athletes, just because cardio athletes are primarily type 1 muscle. So they don't need quite as much. And then like if you're trying to maintain or build mass, so like a bodybuilder, probably a little bit higher. We're going to take it up to 2.0. If you're doing 1 gram per pound, that's 2.2. So slightly outside of recommendations. Cool. Questions, comments, concerns on proteins, friends? How we doing? Feel solid on that?
Good.
Nice. Okay, well, what order is the PowerPoint going? The carbohydrates. Okay, back to the blueprint. I'm like, I didn't want to do it in my order. So the next one we're gonna go over, let's do carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, a little bit easier to understand in my opinion. I wouldn't necessarily say they are the most important nutrient, although NASM does say that. They're like, it's the most important nutrient because it's like the one you need in the largest amounts every day. And I know there's a world of anti-carb out there, but let's talk about what a carbohydrate is before we before we go anti-carb. So what the heck is a carbohydrate? Well, by definition, it is compounds containing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Those are the same, 3 of the same ingredients we saw in protein. And they include simple sugars, complex carbohydrates, glycogen, and fiber. So there's 4 sort of types of carbohydrates out there. They went with the compound definition here. I don't love the. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna slightly give us a what I think is a little bit of a better, easier to understand working definition. So carbohydrates, right? And we do want to include that, yeah, they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But they are complex chains of sugars. So now it's like, okay, like a protein was a complex chain of amino acids. A carbohydrate is a complex chain of sugars. So what the heck are sugars? Well, there's different types of sugars out there in the world, right? They're made by plants, and they kind of exist as this compound of just carbon, just hydrogen, and just oxygen, right? So complex chains of sugars containing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They include simple sugars, complex carbohydrates, glycogen, and fibers. Okay, so we talk about carbohydrates just a little bit differently than we talk about proteins. So when we break down, you know, this idea of like carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, we're going to get to fats in a moment, guys. I'm going to spoil this a little bit. Spoiler alert. Fats also contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They're the same ingredients. They're bonded differently, so they look different. But again, like protein was pretty similar to that. It also contained carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So again, when you say you're a carbon-based life form, it means that you're made up of a lot of stuff that is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The protein, though, has nitrogen in it, which makes the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen like fold and make all these funky shapes. And that's how we got our amino acids. That was thanks to the nitrogen. But for now, if we just had carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and it was shaped in a little ring like this, we would have what we call a sugar. So 4 categories here. First, simple sugars. What are simple sugars? Well, there's a couple of them out there. That is going to be what we refer to as a monosaccharide. So monosaccharides, right? So simple, actually, you know what? Let's put that here. We'll say simple sugars are mono. That makes more sense. So simple sugars, by definition, we are going to say that they are single sugar molecules, right? So individual single sugar molecules, okay? Then we've got our next category here, complex carbohydrates. Right? These are going to be polysaccharides. Poly for many. Saccharide, by the way, for sugar. And so these are multiple sugar molecules linked together in long, complex chains. Cool. That's not too bad, right? Multiple sugar molecules all coming together. So a complex carb is like a piece of bread, you know? That piece of bread is made up of a whole bunch of individual monosaccharides all linked together. Oh, you know what? I should say simple sugars. Ooh, sorry. It's not just individuals. Oh, I forgot how they're doing this nowadays. We also have our disaccharides, which wasn't listed here as part of our simple sugars. So simple sugars really quickly, mono or just 2 sugar molecules linked together. If it's just the 2 linked together, those are also simple sugars. So mono and disaccharides. So 2 individual sugar molecules or 2 simple sugar molecules linked together. So yeah, but when we get to like a lot of sugar molecules linked together, that's how we get our complex carbs. Yeah, that's gonna be a little bit more clear with how they're doing it in this version. Okay, then we've got glycogen. Now I'm going to do glycogen in a moment. I'm going to go slightly out of order here. We get glycogen and fiber. Okay, so fiber, let's do that one next. So fiber, which is I think going to be on the next page probably. Yeah. So fiber is an undigestible carbohydrate, right? So it is an indigestible carbohydrate found in plant foods, right? It's so complex that it basically cannot break down. That's what's really cool about fiber. So they're like a hyper complex carbohydrate. So you got simple carbohydrates, you got complex carbohydrates, and you got fiber. Fiber is the like super one. Now, there is also glycogen. Now, glycogen is kind of a funny one because glycogen is the one that you make. Glycogen is the one that our bodies make. So it's a complex carbohydrate, but like complex in that our body assembled a bunch of sugar molecules together. It's less complex than like what you would find in like a plant because it's gonna be less tightly stuffed. There's gonna be a lot of water in glycogen, but it is still like a big, long, kind of complex chain. So glycogen, we're gonna say, is glucose that is stored in the human body in tissues like the liver, and muscles. It is the storage form of carbohydrates in the body. So glycogen is a complex carb, but it's like I said, it's the version that you can basically hold on to for later. So if you eat something that's like really rich in carbohydrates, and that's going to naturally raise your blood sugar levels so that you can do like work. But you're also, if you have too much carbohydrates, your body's gonna be like, all right, well, I don't need all of that sugar right now. I'm going to store some of this to be used for later in case we run into a scenario where, I don't have any glucose coming in, right? Um, so it's stored in the human body to be used later. So, okay, so those are our four major categories: simple sugars, complex carbs, fibers, and glycogen. So if we look at like a nutrition label, right? Let's look at I don't know what's a good example. Let's look at a potato. So we're going to go to the nutrition facts on like a potato here, right? So if we take a look at this nutrition label, right, we're going to see it's got 26 grams of carbohydrates in it, which means it's got 26 grams of all of this stuff in some capacity. These are all the carbohydrates, right? So that's 26 grams of carbohydrates. But if we look further, we can see that 2 grams of it are made up of dietary fiber. So, okay, so of the 26, right, we know that 2 of it is fiber because your potato has skin on it, right? And skin is very complex, difficult to break down. And it's got 1 gram of sugar in it, which means we go back here, we can see it's got 1 gram of simple carbohydrates. So that's 26 minus 2 minus 1, right? So that gives us 23 grams of complex carbohydrates. And because a potato is not a living organism, it doesn't have any glycogen. So that's how we can kind of break that down. So let's, oh my gosh. Sorry. Fake spider webs are all, I mean, hopefully fake spider webs are all are running around my office right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our individual categories of these things are. So for simple sugars, we are going to have glucose, right, is going to be a monosaccharide. So you're going to have glucose, fructose, which is just slightly different looking. And then we're also going to have lactose, right? So our three, oops, no, galactose. Right, so when we look at our 3 individual sugar molecules, right, there are sort of 3 different versions of them. These are what we call monosaccharides. Oh, come on, internet. There we go. Hold on. Actually, I might have goofed that up. Hold on 1 second. Monosaccharides. I might have goofed up my list. Okay, no, I didn't. So glucose, fructose, and galactose, right? Those are our individual single sugar molecules. But we also said simple sugars could be double molecules, like linked together. So those are our disaccharides, right? And the disaccharides you're going to have are going to be sucrose. Come on now, that's the biggest one. So sucrose, lactose, and maltose, right? So sucrose, lactose, and maltose. So glucose linked together twice is how you are going to get maltose. It's going to be found in milk and a few starchy products. Sucrose, you're going to get that by linking together glucose and fructose. That's why fruit tastes so sweet. Fruit has very high levels of fructose in it. And so like when you get a lot of like sweetness from like a fruit and you combine it together with something like glucose, which is like a more of a liquid, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of very, very sweet stuff. Sucrose is basically table sugar. And then we've got lactose. And lactose is going to be glucose attached to galactose. If you are lactose intolerant, basically that is somebody who lacks the enzyme that can break those two sugar molecules apart. So this little bond right here, if you're lactose intolerant, you have a hard time breaking this bond. And that's why it causes so many problems, because once it reaches your large intestine, your gut bacteria is like, and goes crazy, makes a bunch of gas, causes cramping, all kinds of problems. So those are our single sugars. Now, like I said, complex carbohydrates are just big, long chains of this. So if we look at like a complex carbohydrate, so here's an example of like a starch. There's actually a few of them out there. There are a few different, there's amylose and amylopectin, right? So you can see here, amylose, that's a starch. It makes these big, long, like singular chains. You've also got like amylopectin, which makes like these little like kind of branches like this. This is why like you'll have like the difference between different carbohydrates. They'll have slightly different textures, you know? Like a food that's like really rich in amylose is going to be a little more waxy, and a food that's like really rich in amylopectin is going to be a little more fluffy. And that's why there are russet potatoes and golden potatoes, and they're slightly different than one another. Um, see, the Irish guy is we're talking a lot about potatoes. Now glycogen, you'll notice it actually looks pretty similar to amylopectin. But see how it's much more large, and then there's a bunch of like little tiny itty bitty branches coming off of it. So glycogen looks like that. And there's what you don't see in the picture here is that like glycogen would also have like a lot of water kind of stuffed between all these molecules here. So when someone says like when somebody goes on like a crash diet, like let's say they do like a juice cleanse or something like that. If you do a juice cleanse, you're not getting very many calories. You're certainly not getting very many carbohydrates. I mean, I guess ironically, a juice is going to be mostly sugar. So the only thing you're going to be getting are carbohydrates. But still, you're not getting very much, right? Despite it being a high percentage of what you're eating, you're getting like, 200 calories a day. You know what I mean? Like nothing. So what ends up happening is you're going to lose a massive amount of weight really quickly, which makes it seem like that cleanse was super effective. But the reality is, because your body needs sugar and it needs to keep your blood sugar levels like at a normal level, what ends up happening is your body is going to find carbohydrates from somewhere. It needs them, right? Well, guess what? You store a lot of glycogen in your liver, and you store a whole lot of it in all of the muscle throughout your body. And that glycogen has a lot of water stored in it because we're pretty water-based, right? So you end up dumping all that glycogen that you have stored inside your back into your bloodstream. And when that happens, right, when you dump all that glycogen into your bloodstream, it keeps your blood sugar levels normal, and then you are losing that glycogen, which means you're also going to have extra water that you're probably going to pee out, or sweat out, or get rid of, right? So you're going to lose a lot of weight very, very quickly. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose a lot of fat very quickly, but you're dropping weight pretty rapidly. And that is basically what happens and why people think like crash or fad diets are so effective. It's also what we refer to when we say someone is losing a lot of water weight. They're talking about all the water stuffed between your glycogen. So we got the animal version of carbohydrate here in glycogen. We got the plant version of carbohydrates over here in our starches. But there's also one more that we're going to find in plants. We saw that potato had 2 grams of fiber in it. What the heck is fiber? Well, fiber is like a complex carbohydrate, but it's like a hyper complex carbohydrate. Like the one little flaw with our picture here is that like these are just kind of linked like this, like straight across. There should be like a little chemical bond in between each of them, like a little like line like this. But what you see with like fiber is that there's lines in both directions. It's so tightly compact together that like the enzymes that help you break down carbohydrates can't help you break down fiber. It's too freaking complex. Your body just does not have the tools necessary to break this down. So we eat it, and then it works its way through our GI tract. I just realized I've gotten way ahead of my PowerPoint slides. Um, polysaccharides, fiber. um, it works its way through your GI tract and basically pulls anything that you might have eaten that isn't fully digested. Maybe you just got into a place where, you are missing some enzymes or something happened. For some reason, you got some undigested food. Well, fiber is going to help push that through to maybe get it digested, which is nice. But also just make sure that like you are gastrically emptying, which is why anybody in here who has ever had like coffee and a bran muffin in the morning will tell you that it will really get things moving. And that's what fiber is. So fiber is the indigestible parts of a carbohydrate found, in foods and stuff. So there we go. We've got we look at our definitions here in terms of carbohydrates. Where am I at? There am I. We've got our polysaccharides, which are complex, our starches, which are, starches are polysaccharides, right? They come in a couple of different versions. It's just the starch is what we refer to. We talk about like food. Polysaccharide is what we're talking about. We talk about like chemistry. But starches are polysaccharides all linked together. And then we have our fiber. There are two different types of fiber, by the way. They're soluble and insoluble. They basically work the same, just a little bit differently. Soluble fiber breaks down in water. Insoluble fiber doesn't. So if you were to dump soluble fiber into a jar, it would basically just like kind of absorb a lot of that water and kind of stiffen and harden and become like kind of this big lumpy thing. If you dumped insoluble fiber into water, this is kind of cool. Yeah, come on. Hold on a second. It's kind of fun. It will make, if you guys remember Magic Sand. Oh, come on. Surely someone has done a video of dumping. Oh, oh wait. There we go.
I've got a way that you can
Oh
use
no, that's soluble fiber.
the ends
Ah,
of a smaller.
Are you talking
oh,
about kinetic sand?
what's that?
We're talking about kinetic sand?
Yeah, kinetic sand. Like the sand that like when you dump it in water and then like and then you pull it out and it's dry and then you put it back in and it's wet and you pull it out and it's dry. Like when you were a kid.
I don't know if it does that, but I know it shapes and molds. You know what I mean? It kind of stays together. It's not like regular sand.
You never seen this the magic sand like when you were a kid? They used to. I never had this, but they would
I think
advertise it on
magic
like
sand is like
Nickelodeon.
kinetic sand. I think it's,
This
yeah, I
is
think
called
it's similar.
hydrophobic sand. You can see I dunk my finger underwater. It's fully submerged, but watch.
So when he pulls it out, his finger's perfectly dry.
You can take a mat, dunk it in the water, and look. So let's.
How
cool.
did I miss this as a child?
You don't remember? They had commercials for. Oh God, what is it? I just can't remember what it's called. Nickelodeon.
Yeah, I think it's trikinetic sand. I mean, this is around kind of,
I think I want to get some.
my kids got this as a present. My friends hate me. It
Right?
got
Seriously,
everywhere.
it's so
Honestly.
messy. All right, here's a no, don't pause the recording. Just share the sound here. All right, here is I'm assuming this is a commercial from Nickelodeon back in the days because that's what I looked up. I actually don't know what this is, but
Magic sand pours into the water, shifts and changes into weird and funny shapes. With magic sand, you can make underwater sand paintings, even a house and sand clouds that float, or build a weird and pretty underwater city. And you can use magic sand over and over again. Here's why. It comes out of the water instantly dry, each sold separately. Magic sand in red, yellow, or blue from...
So the way it works is it is basically like hydrophobic sand. And so the parts that are like afraid of water face themselves inwards. And so that prevents water from getting to it. And then when you pull it back into dry, like it faces outwards again. It's the same way that fats actually sit on top of like, it's why fats form those like big globules. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But like, yeah, very similar. So fiber, insoluble fiber is essentially that. It does not bond with water or break down in water. So when it's in your body, it pushes through out the other side. Getting a little bit TMI, but the best way to kind of think of insoluble fiber, if you've ever changed like a kid's diaper and it like looks real dry, or like your dog, they probably like ate some grass or something, which is made of a lot of insoluble fiber. Gross. So next,
Less likely the kid ate grass, though.
yeah, that's fair. Less, but not zero. All right, so those are our carbohydrates, right? Now we do need to talk about like, well, how many carbohydrates should we eat each day? Actually, fiber recommendations first, because that's an important one. Women are going to be somewhere between 25 and 28 grams a day. Men anywhere between 30 and 34 grams a day. Those are our fiber recommendations. Ooh, that's not what I want. All right, hold on. And that's because the assumption is that men just typically weigh more. That's it. You're going to be eating more calories. So eat more calories, more of it should be fiber. Just aim for 35. Everybody just aim for 35. Men and women. More fiber is not going to hurt you. That is that. And then our regular carbohydrate like recommendations. We want anywhere between 45 to 65% of your caloric intake per day. So we want our carbohydrate intake to be between 45 to 65% total calories per day. So that's the easiest way to consider that. Any questions on carbohydrates, guys? Seems pretty good. Let's do fats. Fats are, I don't know, in some ways the chemistry of fats is a little bit more complicated, but fats to understand are kind of easier because you get enough of them and you are good. So when we're talking about fats, what we're really talking about is we're talking about lipids, right? So now I go back to the top of my PowerPoint. Wait, where are you? Protein, carbohydrates. Where's my fats? Oh, fats doesn't have a friggin'. Is that what it is? Yeah, fats doesn't have a title slide. But it's got a whole one slide. So fats are a little bit easier. I mean, they're really important, but like I don't know, they just don't get enough attention. Because carbohydrates give you energy for sports. So like trainers, we like talking about that. Proteins repair your body, which is like important for building muscle. So we talk about that. But like fats, it's like, yeah, they're good for hormones. Moving on. They don't get they're the middle child. They don't get enough attention. Lipids is the technical term here. Lipids or fats are also going to be complex chains of kind of the same thing, right? They are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but they are shaped just a little bit differently. So these are groups of fats or fatty acids and their derivatives, right? Meaning like they're little tiny versions. So lipids, we're going to say groups of fats or fatty acids and their derivatives, meaning like they're kind of variations there. So, okay, triglycerides, phospholipids, and sterols. Those are going to be our main major categories here, right? So we'll start with triglycerides because those are the ones that when you guys are talking about fats and when you're talking about fats with your clients, these are probably what you are talking about, right? So triglycerides, right, are the chemical substrate form of fat, right? So they're complex chains of fatty acids all coming together, okay? They're similar to carbohydrate. Let's take a look at a molecule of glucose here really quick. Like an individual glucose, an individual single sugar, right? Oxygen, hydrogen, oxygen, 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 right? That's actually not, that's L-glucose. God dang it. There we go. I was like, where's my carbon? So here's our chemical formula for an individual sugar. CHO. CHNO. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. There are 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms, which is why generally you'll hear people say it's C6H12O6, the classic, carbohydrate formula. Okay, let's look at a fat. Triglyceride. If you look at their structure, looks a little bit different. You can see we just kind of draw these like big long lines here, but if you filled in those lines, it would look like this. Carbon, 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 hydrogen, 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 and some oxygen. So we see a little bit less oxygen in each of these individual chains, at least. We see way more carbon and way more hydrogen, which is what, oh, I forgot one factoid about carbohydrates you guys need to know. Whoops. One more thing, 4 calories per gram. Just like protein. I forgot to put that on there. That is important to remember. So 4 calories in 1 gram of protein, 4 calories in 1 gram of carbohydrates. But look at how long this complicated chain is with lots of energy trapped between these bonds. Well, fats have 9 calories per gram. So they're a much more energy calorie dense material, right? Fats are, they got a little more, they have more calories in them. They have a little more density in them, right? And that's why they look a little bit different. Also, like their shape is giving them a difference here. But when we look at this, right, this is what we refer to when we're talking about fats. So when we say like a triglyceride, it's a substrate, meaning a big long chain of lipids. So like all those fats kind of coming together. Now, when I say triglycerides, the other versions you're going to see, you've got phospholipids, right, which are basically double fat molecules. And you're also going to have like sterols, which are kind of like monolipids. They're by themselves, single fat molecules with rings of carbon. Your sterols are your precursors to your steroids, which are like hormones and things like that inside the human body. So we need all of these. But here's what's nice, guys. You really don't have to worry about getting enough phospholipids or enough sterols in your diet because they're going to kind of naturally be mixed in with your triglycerides, which are the fats that we talk about when we're talking about like diet. So when you're talking about fats, when you're talking about chemistry, there's these 3 major types. When you're talking about fats with like your clients and you're talking about like the foods that you eat, you are talking about triglycerides. So the examples of triglycerides out there are going to be saturated fatty acids or saturated fats and unsaturated fatty acids or unsaturated fats. And then also trans fats, right? Which are modified unsaturated fats. They used to be good fats, and then we ruined them. So saturated fatty acids are triglycerides that are saturated with hydrogen. Now, what I mean by that is like, take a look at this picture here. See how like there's a little carbon in the middle? And there's a bunch of hydrogen attached to each of those carbons. So you'll notice every carbon has a hydrogen. It's all filled. It's saturated. But if you look here, this is an unsaturated fat. There's this little double bond here that causes this kink to happen. So instead of having like a straight line, it kinks, right? And that kink leaves an empty space for hydrogen to bond. That's an unsaturated fatty acid. Now, if you wanted to fill that empty space, all you have to do is take that unsaturated fatty acid. That'd be an example would be like olive oil, by the way. Toss it into a pan, heat it up to ripping hot temperatures to where it starts smoking and boiling. And when it starts boiling and smoking, that's agitating it so much, it's actually going to rip hydrogen out of the atmosphere and bond it to that oil. That's how we make fried foods. And that has just created, you have just invented something that did not exist in nature until humanity started heating up and cooking foods. You just invented trans fats, which are modified fats that are highly destructive in the body. Trans fats do a lot of harm. They are linked to cancer. They're linked to obviously heart disease, all kinds of really, really bad things there. So trans fats, we are desperately trying to avoid, even though they are the best tasting because everybody loves a fried donut. So unsaturated fats are triglycerides that are not saturated with hydrogen. So they form kinks in their chemical structure. So that kink is actually what keeps them, by the way, liquid at room temperature. So you can actually tell the difference between a saturated fat and an unsaturated fat pretty quickly by looking at it. If you see that it's solid at room temperature, it's probably mostly a saturated fat. If you see that it's liquid at room temperature, it's probably mostly an unsaturated fat. And then there are two variations within that unsaturated fat. There's monounsaturated, which means it has single kinks. And polyunsaturated, which just means, oh my gosh. Oh, I didn't realize I copied the whole thing. Multiple kinks in them. Okay. So that is the difference between monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So those are fats that have a little bit more space in them. So this picture here, it's like one singular kink, so that would be a monounsaturated fatty acid. So here's the thing. Monounsaturated fatty acids are liquid at room temperature, and saturated fatty acids are solid at room temperature. So if we're talking about like the types of fats that are more likely to clog your arteries, we're probably talking about the ones that are more solid at room temperature. And that's the part that's, going to kind of get you in trouble. It's also talking about like cholesterols. Saturated fats are going to be higher in cholesterols, which are these little single sterol ones here, as well as like some phospholipids, right? So like I said, when you're talking about like fats with your clients, guys, you're talking about triglycerides. Like you're not going to take a ton of time to like talk about these things here. Just mostly talking about like, this is saturated fat, this is unsaturated fat. You want to have more unsaturated fat. For the record, like saturated fat's not like evil. It's just we have access to way too much of it in our diet. That's the problem. it's not a bad thing. It's a really good source of nutrition and calories and, stuff that we really like. We just have, because of the Industrial Revolution, we are able to like farm animals very, very easily and get them to our table very, very easily. And so because of that, our diet is super high in saturated fat compared to like what it used to be, you know, um, compared to sort of how we evolved. So we're not particularly very good at dealing with excessive levels of saturated fat. But it's not like evil. Trans fats, those are evil. Trans fats are really bad. Trans fats are taking good fats and then they've been superheated and converted in like so your body is like, oh, it's a good fat, it's an unsaturated fat. But then it gets into your body and it literally destroys your good cholesterols, clogs your arteries. It is way, way, way worse. So, real bad. Real bad. So a couple of things, just the little factoids that we need. 9 calories per gram. No matter what type of fat it is, 9 calories per gram. And in terms of your total caloric intake, you want it to be 20 to 30% total caloric intake. So guys, mostly what you can see here, we've gone through our definitions of proteins, fats, and carbs. Most of what you need is just understanding what a protein, what a fat, what a carb is. And I had to write, obviously these definitions are kind of long and like these long, kind of science sentences here. But that's just because like you need to be able to kind of speak that language when you are looking at it on like a test version, But for the most part, look at this. It's just like, what is the macronutrient? Like, it's real. And then like, what's the recommendation? With protein, you've got 2 types of recommendation. It's either going to be, they want you to know the 0.8 grams per kilogram. They don't make you know all of them, just the 0.8 grams one, or the percentage one. So you do, Yasmin, I know you're big on flashcards. This percentage right here, this percentage right here, and this percentage right here. Those are probably the big ones. So yeah, those are our macros, guys. Questions, comments, concerns? How we doing?
Good.
The ones you emphasize are the ones that we need to know, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I am starting to get a lot of flashcards.
Oh yeah? What's up?
No, I just have like it's just becoming a really, really giant stack.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard questions. Flashcards. Getting a lot of flashcards.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that too, but like that can wait until like the end of the lesson.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's like what you mostly just want to know like what they are, That's really the big thing they're asking. Now, I will say, Trisha, just addressing what you were asking earlier, is there more to know? Definitely. Like you guys are having an actual like nutrition course, you know what I mean? That's not what today is, but like,
Right.
yeah, you have a nutrition test to pass. We're going to do test prep for that individually.
Okay. Well, mainly because I was just looking at this list and because we switched the order of like the corrective exercise and that from the original schedule, I was actually just trying to figure out what classes we still have to take or that I
sure.
still have to finish.
Yeah. Those dates are inaccurate. That's what happens when you try to make Brad teach 2 different classes at the same time with different schedules. And don't hire a different instructor.
And I think you give us different course numbers also than what the list shows.
That is also something. Yeah. I don't have that. I mean, I do because you've sent me a picture. But yeah, I actually don't have the list of your course numbers.
Yeah.
Luckily, course numbers, fun fact, are totally made up by every university. Did we already talk about it? I think we talked about this one day. I did not know this because I didn't look this up. I always thought the number 101 meant something at universities. Because like English 101, and it's like, oh, that means introduction. Nope, it's just kind of a tradition. It actually doesn't mean anything. They can just make up whatever number they want at schools, every university in the universe. That broke my brain when I found that out. I was like, what?
Well, I feel like so she takes advantage of that rule.
Can I tell you, I had a brilliant idea for how to structure all of our stuff. Is like for the associate students, it's like, you've got PTA classes to take, you've got personal training classes to take, you've got massage therapy classes to take, right? Like, and then there's like general gen ed, right? And it's like all we got to do is label the gen ed class. You get 3 numbers because every school for some reason, like we love 3 numbers in our classes, right? So 101, 101. First digit is what section. So general ed would be 1. We'll say the trainer classes would be 2. The massage classes are 3. The PTA classes is 4, right? And then what section you're taking. So in the wheel of each of those like individual people, like, are you in the first section, second section? So 1 1 1 1, 2 2 1 3 1, or 3 2, whatever. And then the name of the class, like 1 2 or 3. I brought it up, nobody liked my idea, and we moved on. And I was like, so mad.
They might have to change something that they're doing if they changed it.
Yeah. Can I just tell? It's so funny. Whatever.
Have to do something.
Yeah. All right. Vitamins and minerals.
Right.
These are easy. This list is about to get way shorter for vitamins and minerals. So, fat was already pretty easy, but vitamins and minerals, there's a lot to them. They're really cool. There's lots to learn. Not on your regular test, though. On your regular test, we're going to keep this really, really, really simple. So, here we go. Vitamins. That's metabolism. Hold on. Can I give me a definition of vitamins? Hold on. All right. Oh, it was on the first page. Okay. That's so weird spot for that. All right. So what's a vitamin? It's kind of like a protein, but NASM doesn't need you to know that. But if you look at it, it is super similar to a protein. But vitamins are groups of, these are organic, so they have carbon in them, organic compounds required in small amounts in the diet to support growth and metabolic processes. So vitamins are pretty cool because they basically assist your body to do all the stuff we talked about. Remember, breaking down proteins, vitamins kind of help that take place inside the body. Putting them back together, vitamins kind of help with that taking place in the body. We are going to divide vitamins into 2 major categories. You are going to see that there are fat-soluble vitamins, which are vitamins that break down and are transported in fat or lipids, right? For your fat-soluble vitamins, you've got vitamins A, D, E, and K. ADEK or KADA, whatever you want to say. That's your fat-soluble vitamins. Cool, that's it. Then we got water-soluble vitamins. Like I said, vitamins are real easy. They don't test you on much in the regular book. Water-soluble vitamins are vitamins that break down and are transported in water instead of fat. This is going to be your entire B complex and vitamin C. That's pretty much it. There's so much more to talk about that's really, really cool. Vitamins act as antioxidants, so they protect you against cancer. They, like I said, they do support repair of tissues and things like that, which is huge and really, really cool. A, D, and K act a little bit differently than vitamin C. which is really neat. The B complex is what allows you to metabolize, which is amazing. But for the most part, really all you need, the big bullet points that they test you on in the standard edition. What is a vitamin? It's an organic compound needed in small amounts that help with metabolism and growth. And then what type of vitamins are there? Fat soluble and water soluble. I don't even think they actually will say ADEC and things like that. Minerals, a little bit more simple, right? These are inorganic natural substances, some of which are essential in the body. Essential in nutrition. Now, there are two types. I'm going to change just the way this looks a little bit here as well. But here's the thing, not really. So when I say two types of vitamins, one of them dissolves in fat, one of them dissolves in water. That's like a characteristic that they share that makes them different from one another. Minerals actually doesn't work like that, but there are two types of minerals. Yeah, major minerals. And you have trace minerals. So do major minerals break down in water, or are major minerals like, you know, what do they have that's like similar to each other? Nothing. Every mineral is different than every other mineral. All minerals are totally their own thing, totally different. We classify them major and trace. Major, you as a person, more than 100 milligrams per day. And trace, you need less than 100 milligrams per day. So it's weird, right? Like, we classified vitamins based on like a characteristic that they had, you know, like water or fat. Minerals, we just classify them based on like, you need a little, you need a lot. You need a major amount, you need trace amounts. But every mineral is totally different than every other mineral. Like, calcium is very different than iron. They're both metals, but you know, they're different than one another. And yes, calcium is a metal, which is weird because you're like, isn't it a rock? You tell me what the difference between a metal and a rock is, from a chemistry standpoint. So that's kind of, I mean, honestly, that's it for, you know, nutrients that are not water. And then water is also really simple. I mean, water is so freaking important, but again, in your standard edition textbook, water, they take a really simple approach here, which is nice because, like, man, water can be, you know, it's the most important thing in the world. But we actually don't have to talk too much about it. Oh, it's in this chapter. Yeah. Each individual thing. There we go. So here's our water. We need to know our hydration strategies, basically. So water, the most essential nutrient, right? I mean, here's the thing. We start to get into like metabolism. It's like you could start to consider like oxygen as a nutrient. Oxygen's the most essential. You get minutes without oxygen before you die. With water, you get a day or two, you know. With fats, vitamins, and carbohydrates, you can go a pretty long time without those things and still survive. So in terms of essentialness, in terms of like food, water is top of the list. You really can't go that long. So it is the most essential nutrient, very important for metabolism inside the body. You know, it literally facilitates metabolism, you know. So if you had a molecule and you shoved some water into that molecule, you can break that molecule apart. If you took two individual molecules and you took the components of water and pulled some out from one and pulled some out from the other, those two molecules would actually link together. So literally anabolic and catabolic processes are both thanks to water. So it's hugely important. But we take a break because it's so, I don't know, maybe it's because it's so important. And there's so much to learn. NASM just kind of boils it down. Nope, unintended. And tells you how much today. But here's what you need. Here's the one piece of info you need with water. Recommendations. Are going to be 2.7 liters a day for women. And 3.7 liters per day for men. And there you go. That's it. That's what you guys need to know. Whoops. 2.7 liters a day for women, 3.7 liters a day for men. If you know that, you are golden on what you need. I mean, obviously you could break that down into like ounces. That's about 124 ounces for men and about 92 ounces for women. By the way, guys, if you want to do this in a really easy way, what I do, just get yourself a 32-ounce protein shaker bottle. I mean, the 28-ounce one, if you kill it 4 times a day, you're getting 112 ounces of water, which is just under 124. You're probably getting the rest from food, because that's one thing we never talk about. There's a ton of water in food. Even cereal has water in it. It's about as low as it gets on the list. But like a piece of fruit, tons of water, you know? But kill a protein shaker 3 times a day. 4 times a day if you're a guy, or 28 times 3, you're getting 168 ounces. That's not true. Times 3, you're getting 84 ounces, which is just barely under the 92 for women. Again, assuming you're getting the rest. So go get yourself a protein shaker. Guys, kill it 4 times a day. Ladies, kill it 3 times a day. Hydration schedule taken care of. And it can be tea, it can be coffee. You know, the whole, coffee dehydrates you is not necessarily true. It's a little true. There is a version of truth to it, but for the most part, you drinking coffee still counts towards your hydration every day. So this is probably 12 ounces. So there's our hydration concepts and guidelines. That's it. Questions on water? Probably not. Okay. Next one we got to look at is caloric expenditure. Actually, no, sorry. Next is I did want to review with our little macro video. Okay. So I know some of you guys love the videos as a little mental break. Some of you guys not so much. If you're not a video person, stay awake for this. But let's do just a quick little review of that nutrition. All right, pausing my recording, guys. Right here, and click this one. This is going to basically take us through the macronutrients chapter. So I'm going to pause my recording. That back on. So when it comes to our recommendations for caloric intake, we do got one more little bit we want to put in here, just in terms of our overall like calories, and then we'll take a look at metabolism here as well. So we still got to get through our recommendations. So we're going to look at like caloric recommendations. That's going to help us understand our energy systems. We'll look at EPOC, which is a weird place to look at EPOC. We're going to talk way more about that when we do cardio. I don't know why that's in this section. That has nothing to do with nutrition. Calories, which is caloric intake. And then like portion sizes, nutrients, and then we'll kill some fat. We'll kill some fads here at the end. So first thing we got to look at is understand, like, if your clients are trying to manage their body composition, right? Like when it comes to managing, like, gaining weight or losing weight, we're going to step outside of the realm of biology here for just a second, and we're going to talk about the first law of thermodynamics. Okay, so the laws of thermodynamics are basically laws of physics that we've studied to figure out, like, how does this universe that we all share actually work. I closed my freaking thing. That was dumb. Can I just go to my history? Does that work? Ugh, it's not even on there. Okay. All right. Sorry. Log in. Stand by, everybody. Hmm. I cannot believe I closed that window. All right. Okay. So, looking at our recommendation for our nutrition strategies, right? The first thing we're going to look at is this law of thermodynamics, and it basically says, energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. It can just change shape from one form to another. Now, that doesn't sound very helpful when you hear it at first, but think about it this way, right? When I say energy cannot be created or destroyed, what it means is that all the energy that exists in the freaking universe right now has existed and will exist since the beginning and until the end of all time, which is crazy. So when I said earlier that we're just converting energy from the sun, which got converted into plants, and then we eat those plants, and that converted us into us, that is that energy changing shape. But it can't just randomly be deleted. You can't just get rid of energy in general. You have to change its shape. So energy that became a potato, which became the energy in that potato, which became the fuel that allowed me to do stuff. I didn't just get rid of that potato. I burned it up through heat energy. I released those carbon atoms through exhaling in my carbon dioxide, my CO2, right? So where does your calories actually go? You exhale them. A little bit of it comes out in your sweat and urine and stuff as well. But you convert calories into stuff, doing work, right? So it's not going anywhere. So if you consume more calories than you are expending, it can't just be deleted. It has to go somewhere. So your body is well, we burned 2,500 calories today, but we consumed 2,700 calories. Where's that 200 calories going to go? It can't just get deleted. It has to go somewhere. So it gets stored either as glycogen in your liver or muscles, if you're storing it as a carbohydrate, or if your body wants it for long-term storage, it will store it as fat inside the body. So that's the reason we got to look at that first. And so now when we look at okay, so now basically it's like a bank account. I'm trying to balance how many calories are coming in versus how many calories are going out. And that way I'll use this first law of thermodynamics to my advantage. So probably the most important thing you need to know when it comes to your own expenditure is how many calories do you burn at rest? How many calories do you burn simply by existing, right? And that's what our basal metabolic rate, or BMR, is. Now, this has nothing to do with the BMI. A lot of people know that one. That's your body mass index. That's a calculation of your height versus your weight. Doesn't have anything to do with this. BMR is the amount of energy required to maintain your body at rest. So this is the amount of energy you burn existing, right? Most of you guys are probably at home right now, I imagine, sitting there listening, probably not doing much, you're not squatting around, you're not jumping around, you're not doing any of that. So most of you guys are actually burning the amount of energy that's pretty close to your BMR. There's a lot of different formulas out there to calculate this, but it's really easy. All you guys need to do is go to BMR calculator. NASA actually has one on its website that you could use, but I find that this one right here is pretty darn. Wait, I'm 35.
Is this the same as RMR?
And yeah, I'm about to get there in just one second. Yes, it is. They don't actually mention RMR in the regular textbook. It comes up later.
Okay.
I'll do it in 1 second. These are my stats. I hit calculate here. I burn about 1,800 calories every day existing just by being around. Now, so obviously every day is spent being a little bit more active than just existing. So if I spent the day just sitting around on the couch doing very little, but maybe I do my dishes, maybe I, go to a friend's house to play games or watch a movie or something, little to no exercise, I'm probably actually going to burn a little bit more like this. So maybe 2,166 calories per day. Now, if I exercise 3 days a week, being a little bit more physically active, on average, I'll probably burn closer to 2,400 calories a day. If I'm really active, I'll burn closer to 2,600 calories a day if I'm active 4 to 5 days a week. So the more often I'm active, the more calories I'm going to burn per day because my body's going to have to work to repair all the damage from the exercise that I did from the previous day. So the more you exercise, the more calories you eat. Now, remember, these numbers here are the you stay the same numbers. So if you're trying to lose weight, right, I could exercise 4 to 5 days a week, but I don't want to eat 2,600 calories. That's my stay the same number, right? That's my first law of thermodynamics, energy is equal version. I want to lose weight. So I might eat less than that in order to do that. So maybe I eat slightly less calories than the actual number I'm expending per day. So in order to figure out how many calories you're actually burning per day, you need the most important piece of information, which is your basal metabolic rate. Now, the actual total daily, I wanted to address Lisa. So you asked, what about the RMR? Sometimes you guys will hear the term resting metabolic rate or RMR. They are essentially interchangeable. So I'll put that up here. It's actually, they won't ask you on the test, but occasionally you'll hear RMR, which is resting metabolic rate, essentially the same as BMR. Why are there two different terms? Here's the sneaky thing. Oh, not sneaky, but like, here's what's kind of weird about the whole BMR RMR thing. So BMR is kind of theoretical. It's kind of like this is the assumption of how many calories you burn per day based on math, but you have to treat it as if it is perfectly accurate. So we're going to say that it is the mathematic version that is theoretically perfectly calculated and accurate. RMR is where if you use like a machine to measure how much like oxygen you're breathing, use your body weight and stuff like that, the machine will calculate your resting metabolic rate and it'll calculate you at rest. But you're awake, so you're not actually like perfectly at rest. So when they invented those machines, and then also like people just use this language slightly differently, they came up with two different definitions. But in your job and like what I do every day and like in stuff that we actually have access, the equipment we actually have access to, Lisa and everybody else, RMR and BMR, same thing. Okay. Think of them, they are basically the same thing. There is technically this weird definition out there that keeps them separate, that nobody needs to know unless you are literally one of the people with one of those machines. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. It makes sense in the way that like I explained it. Does it make sense that they both exist? No, it does not. The world does not make sense. The words I'm using probably do. But yeah, if you're like, that's stupid that there's two. Yeah, it is stupid. All right. So, okay, great. Well, again, we needed to figure out how many calories to actually eat each day, right? This was just simply the number of calories, that we're burning at baseline. How many calories do I actually eat each day? Well, what you need to know is how many calories you expend each day. So we have a term, we call it our total daily energy expenditure, or the TDEE. And this is the total number of calories you burn in a day. Okay. So your total daily energy expenditure is literally the actual number of calories you burn. So it is made up of your baseline calories, aka how many calories you burn existing, but it's also going to be made up of the calories that you burn processing food. Processing food actually takes a little bit of energy, weirdly enough. To here. Oh, actually, no, it's my power. Sorry. So there is your total daily energy expenditure, but that is made up of all of these different things. You can think of it as like a pie chart. In fact, actually, a lot of times if you Google this, and you just go to like Google Images, a lot of times you'll see like a pie chart that looks like this. And it's like for the average person, 70%-ish of the calories they burn each day is, existing, right? Like most of the calories you burn. This is one of the reasons why trainers want to put so much muscle mass on our clients. Because if we can put muscle mass onto our clients, the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn by existing. It makes balancing those books a little bit more manageable. But some of the energy is also, physical activity. Somebody who's more physically active, well, then this 20% probably creeps up, gets to be a bigger part of the pie chart, Somebody with less muscle mass, maybe their basal metabolic rate is a smaller part of their pie chart, And then even processing food actually takes up energy. So what we've got is our total daily energy expenditure, and that is made up of the thermic effect of food, or TEF, which is the energy burned by processing food. We have got the thermic effect of activity, or TEA, which is the energy burned by activity. And we have got the basal metabolic rate, which is again the energy burned by existing. Right now, one thing that we do want to, that NASM has started breaking down and getting a little bit more specific about. Go back over to my study guide, which is on this window. Back up here. Where are you? Where'd it go? I know you're in here. Where are you? Okay. Well, maybe it's not there. Maybe that's crazy. So one thing that is in there, but like the difference, the thermic effect of activity, there are two versions of that, right? Activity is going to be broken down. This is new. We didn't talk about this back in the day, but every trainer would end up talking about it. So eventually they put it in textbooks. But when it comes to activity, there's two types of activity. There's the non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, which that just means calorie burn. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the calories, or the energy burned outside of the gym. Well, not outside, we'll say the energy burned not from exercise. And then you have your regular exercise activity thermogenesis, which is EAT. So you have your NEAT and EAT, and that's exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT. Oh, shoot. So this is also really important. This is obviously the calories you'd burn in the gym. So the energy from exercise. But it is also important to make sure that your NEAT is also very high. So one of the best strategies for losing weight is, exercise. That's really good. But if you can exercise and take the stairs and stop parking so close and maybe just walk a little bit more throughout your day, things that are not extra, like, doing things manually, you'll actually end up burning sometimes more calories, by going throughout your day than you will from actual exercise. So yeah, increasing the amount of exercise you're doing every day is a really good way to burn more calories, but also increasing the ways that you don't burn exercise, like anything that's not exercise, is also a really good way to burn calories. So that is that section there in terms of our energy expenditure. Now, just quickly looking at how we actually burn energy. These are two things. We're going to talk about our energy systems here. I'm not actually going to skip forward. Sorry, I'm going to skip forward. I'm going to do fads really quick and myths, and then we'll come back and we'll do metabolism because it's just a weird place for metabolism to be really quick. So what are some of those are general strategies. We don't need that. Where are the myths? Is that not in my PowerPoint? Oh, what if it's here? Interesting. All right, that's fine. I can, why do I'm having trouble finding this? Needs to be a whole thing at the end of the PowerPoint in terms of that. All right. Really, we'll go ahead and just really quickly kill a couple myths here. The big thing NASA wants you to know when it comes to that, and I'll look for that later, but when it comes to like crash diets, fad diets, or like myths, it's like, are any of those things going to be more effective than just like standard nutrition? Basically, no. It's a very simple answer, right? Like, you're not like, is low carb better than low fat or low protein? No. I mean, I guess maybe better than low protein. Low protein, you're gonna have trouble like maintaining muscle mass. But like for the most part, it's like, do you actually lose more fat on a low carb diet? No, we just said with the law of thermodynamics, it's about energy expenditure. Now, if you find that like a high carbohydrate diet is like mostly made up of sugar for you, and so you're having like really high energy and then really low energy, and you're having like insulin spikes and insulin like plummets, then that version's probably not very good for you. But like for some people, a high carb diet is totally a necessity. For people who are like, long distance endurance athletes, carbohydrates are crazy important. What about low fat? Is low fat better? No, not necessarily. Right? What about high fat? No, not necessarily. Right? It's all going to come down to, when it comes to energy, guys, it is all about the calories, right? It's energy in versus energy out. Generally, you want to have a pretty well-balanced diet. Any of those other versions are not necessarily going to be superior or inferior for you. Now, here's what I'll say. I know lots of people who have been like, well, I did a high-fat keto diet that was no carbs, and that worked really well for me, and I had success. Great. Your success was probably attributed to two things. One, your energy expenditure was in a better place. And two, it was a diet that you found particularly easy to stick to. That is probably what explains your success. Not so much the fact that it was like high fat, low carb, or, whatever variation. So does that mean that like high fat, low carb is unhealthy? I didn't say that either. Just because I said like it doesn't mean that's the reason it worked. Doesn't mean that I said it was bad. If you want to do high fat, low carb, great. Like if you're doing it in a way that's like actually healthy and that works for you, I'm a fan. Go for it, But again, to say that it's better for everyone, which is oftentimes how those things are marketed, that version of things, that's the type of that conversation that I don't love. So that's really the big thing. Other fad diets, can you eat whatever you want? Can you add exercise a bad diet? No. Like for the most part, it's way harder to be physically active enough to like make up for like a really poor diet. It's just pretty tough. You're much more likely to have success with a good diet and good amounts of exercise. Or what about cleanses? No, cleanses are nothing. I could talk for days, but I hate cleanses. Okay. Let's circle back to our last little bit here. Let's circle back to metabolism. So metabolism can get a little bit complicated. But like I said, we're just doing it from a food standpoint today. We're going to keep it relatively simple. So this should be a little bit more approachable, makes a little bit more sense for you guys. So when it comes to metabolism, right? You ask a normal biologist, they're going to say there are two major categories of metabolism. There's aerobic metabolism, which is metabolism that uses oxygen or requires oxygen. And then there's your anaerobic, so an for opposite. So what is happening? Caps lock. Off. What? That was the weirdest thing ever. Anaerobic metabolism, which is metabolism that doesn't require oxygen. Okay, so for the most part, we're going to break it down into those two major categories. Now, we do get a little bit more complex with this when we actually look at metabolism in general. But for the most part, you can think of it as aerobic metabolism is your long duration metabolism. Anaerobic metabolism is your short duration metabolism. So one requires oxygen and one doesn't. The one that doesn't, you can create energy in the absence of oxygen, meaning you don't have to like breathe very heavily to do it. So anaerobic metabolism is going to be split up into a couple different categories here. You're going to see the ATP PC system, which is the adenosine triphosphate phosphocreatine system, right? Which makes ATP by using excess creatine molecules to reconstitute burnt up ATP. So when you break down an ATP molecule, you get ADP, right? You lose that third phosphate, you're left with just two of them, diphosphate, right? And so that's the wreckage of an old ATP molecule. Creatine's happy to donate an extra phosphate back onto the ATP and fix it. This can happen super rapidly. This is the stuff that like I don't need to talk about today, but I'm going to talk about it for just a little bit. This happens very quickly. Like very quickly, to supply the body with lots of energy very fast, right? This lasts about 5 to 10 seconds. So not very long. You have very little creatine, you have a very limited capacity to do this. But what it does is it gives you time to do the next part of your aerobic metabolism, which is glycolysis, right? Glycolysis is breaking down carbohydrates using enzymes to release ATP molecules, right? So this uses glucose to break down and produce ATP, and this happens in the fluid of our cells. So this takes place, the reason it's called glycolysis is glyco, from the word meaning coming from sugar, and lysis from the word being metabolized. So we are metabolizing sugar. So we're using glucose to break this down. This produces a lot of energy very rapidly, but it also makes a byproduct of lactic acid at the same time. And that building up is going to make you need to stop. So it uses glucose to produce ATP in the fluid of our cells. This also happens very fast. So this happens quickly to supply the body with lots of energy fairly quickly, right? So not as fast as the ATP-PC system was, but it can do it for a lot longer. This lasts up to 2 minutes. If you're incredible at it, up to 2 minutes. Usually, we'll say up to 1 to 2 minutes. Most people don't have enough, cellular fluid to be able to do this for a really, really long time. So this lasts upwards of, anywhere around 1 to 2 minutes there, but it's making lactic acid as a byproduct. And so that lactic acid starts to build up, your muscles start to feel heavy and sore, right? And so that can be pretty tough, and so we can't do glycolysis forever. Lucky for us, with all that lactic acid sitting there, we actually get to recycle that and use it in our aerobic metabolism. So I'm actually going to move aerobic metabolism down here. And this is going to be the third and most complex energy system. The most complex energy system consisting of the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. And basically, we're going to keep this simple today because we're going to go over this more when we talk about like actually doing cardio and stuff. But basically, this is going to use the byproducts of glycolysis, right? And that's lactic acid, and the addition of oxygen to produce massive amounts of ATP, but kind of slowly, right? So it makes a ton of ATP, but it needs 1 to 2 minutes to even get going. It needs to have adequate levels of lactic acid before it can even kick in. So you don't even train your aerobic metabolism until you've been exercising for like a long duration of time. But it's also where, if you've ever been exercising for a long duration of time, you start to breathe harder and harder and harder and harder. And what that is like the more you're breathing, the more oxygen you're bringing in to convert all of that lactic acid from glycolysis into energy. But again, it had to do the glycolysis part first. So it's pretty slow, but it is also the massive amount of energy. You could essentially do this forever. So the things that you're using right now, guys, even though you're sitting there, probably not being like super active, but like your heart's been beating since before you were born, it is entirely relying on its aerobic metabolism. It's producing energy instead of the fluid of the cells, the mitochondria. So the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, produces ATP using the byproducts of our previous metabolism in order to do so. So that's a really simple breakdown. I want to break this down more when we talk about like sets and reps and tempos and things like that. But basically, the easiest way to think of this is like if I'm lifting anywhere between like 1 to 5 reps, so I'm working really, really hard, but I'm taking long rest periods. I'm not like going to keep going with my exercise. I'm mostly training in this ATP-PC system. If I'm working in like a 6 to 12 rep range, or even up to 20 reps, if I'm doing those reps, if it takes me anywhere between like 30 to 45 seconds, I'm in that, I'm below this lasting 1 to 2 minute thing. I'm mostly training in glycolysis. And then if I'm doing something like cardio or high repetition exercise or circuit training with like lots of exercises in a row, and my breathing keeps going up and up and up and up and up. That's because I'm making more and more and more lactic acid through glycolysis, and my aerobic metabolism is bringing in more and more and more oxygen and converting that lactic acid into massive, 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 massive amounts of energy, which is why sometimes you'll feel, especially after cardio, like, if you do like relatively intense cardio for like short durations, sometimes you'll feel like you actually have way more energy leaving the gym than when you got there. And that's because like all that, lactic acid byproduct that you're creating while working out, once you rest and recover, it all gets converted because you're continuing to breathe hard. And that's one of the coolest things about metabolism. So that's our basic view today. That's kind of establishing, sort of look at this, what these systems actually are. Oh, it says oxidative. That's aerobic. I should have used that term. Aerobic metabolism. So our aerobic or oxidative metabolism here. Just gonna go like that and put that in there because that is the term NASM likes to use. They say oxidative a lot. So there we go, and then we'll put this back. And nobody will know the better. And then one last little thing is we go back to this idea of metabolism here. So if I do a lot of, this glycolysis stuff and I produce a bunch of lactic acid by working really hard, my aerobic metabolism has to pay that off, right? My aerobic metabolism has to like bring in the oxygen necessary to convert all that lactic acid. So I end up with an extra calorie burn sometimes. And that is what we refer to as this final term we're seeing today, which makes no sense. I'm going to talk about this more later because I don't know why they're doing this in nutrition, but EPOC, EPOC, which is excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC, which is the state in which the body's metabolism is elevated after exercise. It's really wimpy definition. There's a better explanation for it. But basically, you create oxygen debt by exercising. Your body has to pay that off for hours or even days sometimes after exercise. So if I work really hard and make a bunch of lactic acid, right? I don't catch my breath immediately between sets, right? I have to kind of keep breathing. And I was like it slows down, right? And that's because like I'm catching my breath. I'm bringing in oxygen to convert. Even though I'm done exercise, I could be sitting down, right? And just recovering. But I'm still breathing hard because there was oxygen debt accumulated during the intense activity. So that intense activity gets less and less and less and less, and I catch my breath, but I'm continuing to get that calorie burn from the hard work that I did. So I always tell my clients, this is a good way to remember EPOC. It's a funny, like half dirty joke that you guys can use with your clients that your clients will think is really funny. I just tell people you can burn calories, like burning calories in the gym is really good. That's your exercise activity thermogenesis, right? But if you work really hard in the gym and you create oxygen debt, you'll burn calories for the next up to 72 hours sometimes, if it's like really intense. So burning calories in the gym is good, but burning calories in bed is way better, right? Burn calories while you're sleeping. Burning calories in bed, way better. You're welcome to interpret that sentence however you want. My favorite dirty joke that I like to use with my clients. That is everything on that. This metabolism stuff really kind of doesn't belong here, but I will say this. Glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose. That's why it's being mentioned here in nutrition. Because you do need to make sure that you have adequate carbohydrates in order to have adequate energy to work, in order to work hard enough to burn calories. And the harder you can work, the more EPOC you will generate. And the more, good Lord, the more EPOC you generate, the more calories you'll burn outside the gym. So having a good carbohydrate heavy meal pre-workout is going to give you the energy necessary to make sure that you're working hard in the gym, which is important. So I think that's why they put this here. It comes up again when we get to cardio, which is like, talking about doing interval training. If you work really hard, you're going to target the ATP-PC system. If you work medium hard, you'll target glycolysis. And if you're going for a long, slow, gentle run, you're probably going to target more your oxidative metabolism. So we'll get more into that part of it later. We'll re-explain this. And that's about it today, guys. Questions, comments, concerns? How are we all doing? Hopefully pretty good. Hopefully didn't lose anybody with the metabolism talk. I'm getting some thumbs ups on the old emojis here. All right. Cool. So let me kill the recording.